house, not a revolution.
Circuit. Very important to keep your...
They got her. Now they're coming after us.
This to the vigilante group known as the French 75.
You have to understand, Willa.
Me and Mom, we sorry.
I didn't ask for this. That's just how the cards were rolled out for me.
It's not cards, you know.
Freedom is no fear, just like Tom Cruise.
And all you got is goddamn nunchucks here. You know where I can get a gun?
Protect you from all your mom's stuff.
Say it. Say it, baby.
Love you, Bob.
Who's this?
Oh, they're just my friends.
Now, is that a he or a she or a they?
It's not that.
One movie, one wild ride. But is one battle after another 2025 really worth the hype? From shocking facts to a no-filter review, Waller breaks it all down. Now let's watch till the end. Because this battle has way more than meets the eye. Mile One Battle After Another is a T25 American epic black comedy and action thriller, directed, written and produced by Paul Thomas Anderson. The movie is inspired by the 1990 novel Vineland by Thomas Pynchon. The film has a stacked cast, including Leonardo DiCaprio, Sean Penn, Benicio Del Toro, Regina Hall, Teyana Taylor, and Chase Infinity, who makes her movie debut in this film. The story follows a washed-up former revolutionary, played by Leonardo DiCaprio. He has basically stepped away from his old life and is trying to stay out of trouble. But things get crazy when his old enemy, played by Sean Penn, suddenly comes back into the picture after being gone for 16 years. This forces DiCaprio's character to face his past all over again, putting both him and the people around him in serious danger. Paul Thomas Anderson had been interested in turning Vineland into a movie since the early 2000s. However, instead of simply adapting the book word for word, Anderson added some of his own ideas and stories to the movie. He eventually turned all of that material into the screenplay for One Battle After Another. The movie was filmed in California between January and June 2024. One pretty wild fact about the production is that it was shot using VistaVision, a large format filming system that had not been used much in movies since the 1960s. So, the filmmakers were basically bringing an old school movie making format back for a huge modern production. The movie had its premiere on September 8, 2025, before being released in theaters across the United States on September 26, 2025 by Warner Bros. Pictures. The production budget was reportedly somewhere between $130 million and $175 million, making it the most expensive movie Paul Thomas Anderson had ever made. At the box office, the movie went on to make more than $213 million worldwide, making it the highest grossing film of Anderson's career. That's a pretty big deal for a director known for making ambitious, serious, and often unusual movies. But the movie wasn't just a box office success. Critics and audiences also gave One Battle After Another a ton of love. It picked up a huge number of awards and nominations and became one of the biggest movies of 2025. At the 90th Academy Awards, the movie received 13 nominations. It ended up winning several major awards, including Best Picture Best Director for Paul Thomas Anderson, Best Supporting Actor for Sean Penn, Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Film Editing, and Best Casting. And yeah, the awards didn't stop there. The movie also picked up one win from 7 nominations at the Actor Awards, along with 3 wins at the Critics' Choice Awards. One of those wins was for Best Picture, which shows just how much love the movie was getting from critics. At the Golden Globes, one battle after another won 4 awards, including Best Motion Picture, Musical, or Comedy. The movie also had a huge night at the British Academy Film Awards, where it won 6 awards, including Best Film. On top of all that, the American Film Institute named One Battle After, another one of the top 10 movies of 2025. The movie also won 5 awards from the National Board of Review, including Best Film. So, when you put everything together, One Battle After Another wasn't just another big Hollywood action movie. It became one of the most talked about and heavily awarded films of 2025. With Paul Thomas Anderson behind the camera, Leonardo DiCaprio leading the cast, a crazy mix of action, comedy, drama, and political themes, plus a ton of awards under its belt, this movie definitely made a major impact. Ghetto Pat Calhoun and Perfidia Beverly Hills are members of a far left revolutionary group called the French 75. During a mission to break detained immigrants out of the Otay Mesa detention center, Perfidia humiliates the officer in charge, Stephen J. Lockjaw. After that, Lockjaw becomes completely obsessed with her. Pat and Perfidia eventually become a couple, but things get seriously messed up when Lockjaw catches Perfidia planting a bomb. Instead of sending her to prison, he lets her go after forcing her into a sexual relationship with him. Later, Perfidia gives birth to a daughter named Charlene. Pat wants Perfidia to leave the revolutionary life behind and build a normal family with him and their daughter. But Perfidia isn't ready to give up the fight. She leaves Pat and Charlene and continues her revolutionary activities. Things get even worse when Perfidia is caught after killing a security guard during an armed bank robbery. Lockjaw makes her a deal. He promises to keep her out of prison if she gives him information about the French 75, including the names and locations of important members. Perfidia agrees and enters the Witness Protection Program. Using the information she gave him, Lockjaw starts hunting down members of the French 75 and killing them. One of the group's members, Howard, helps Pat and Charlene escape by giving them fake identities. They become Bob and Willa Ferguson. Meanwhile, Perfidia leaves witness protection and escapes to Mexico. Fast forward 16 years, and Bob and Willa are living off the grid in Buckton Cross, California, a sanctuary city. Bob has become a paranoid, heavy smoking stoner who is constantly worried about someone coming after them. Bob is extremely protective of Willa, who is now a free spirited teenager. She loves her freedom but is frustrated with Bob's drug use and paranoid behavior. Bob has also spent years telling Willa that her mother, Perfidia, was a hero. Meanwhile, Lockjaw's career has gone in the complete opposite direction. He becomes a colonel and a powerful figure inside US security agencies. He's also become heavily involved in anti immigration efforts. Then things take a seriously dark turn. Lockjaw gets invited to join a secret white supremacist organization called the Christmas Adventurers Club. But there's a problem. His past relationship with Perfidia could expose him. He becomes afraid that Willa could reveal the truth about him, so he decides that she needs to be killed. Lockjaw hires an indigenous bounty hunter named Avanti Q to capture Howard. This move sends a warning signal to the remaining members of the French 75, letting them know that Lockjaw is coming after them again. Lockjaw then sends troops into Buckton Cross, using an immigration and drug operation as a cover for the real mission. A French 75 member named Deandra manages to rescue Willa before the authorities can raid her school dance. Back at home, Bob gets a warning from the French 75 that Lockjaw is after him and Willa. Not long after that, Lockjaw's men storm Bob's house. Bob manages to escape through a secret tunnel. He tries to contact the resistance from a payphone, but there's one big problem. He can't remember the secret greeting code. That's when Sergio St. Carlos, Willa's karate teacher and a respected community leader, steps in to help him. Sergio is also helping immigrants escape through a hidden passage. While Bob and Sergio are trying to get people to safety, Bob escapes with Sergio's students across the rooftops. But things don't go according to plan. Bob falls and gets arrested. Meanwhile, Deandra takes Willa to a convent run by revolutionary nuns. While she's there, Willa finally learns the truth about her mother and what Perfidia did to the French 75. At the same time, the Christmas adventurers discover evidence that Lockjaw had a relationship with Perfidia. They don't take that information lightly. The group sends one of its members, Tim Smith, to kill Lockjaw and Willa. Lockjaw eventually tracks Willa down at the convent. Deandra is arrested, and Lockjaw takes Willa hostage. He then orders a DNA test to be performed right in front of her. The results reveal something shocking. Lockjaw is actually Willa's biological father. Sergio manages to help Bob escape from custody and drives him toward the convent. When the police start chasing them, Sergio literally throws Bob out of the car so he can escape. Bob steals another car and races toward the convent. When he finally gets there, he tries to shoot Lockjaw using Sergio's rifle, but the attempt fails. Lockjaw then hires Avanti to kill Willa, but Avanti refuses because Willa is too young. Lockjaw changes the plan and orders Avanti to deliver Willa to a far right militia instead. But before that can happen, Tim tracks down Lockjaw and shoots him in the face. Lockjaw's car crashes, and everyone assumes he's dead. Bob later finds the crash site while desperately searching for Willa. Meanwhile, Avanti takes Willa to the militia. But Avanti has a change of heart. Instead of handing Willa over, she decides to help her escape. Avanti frees Willa, but ends up getting killed during a shootout with the militia. Willa grabs Avanti's car and pistol and takes off. However, Tim starts following her while Bob is desperately trying to catch up with them. Willa manages to outsmart Tim by using a blind hill to make him crash. After the crash, Tim tries to prove that he's part of the revolutionary group by giving the secret countersign. But he doesn't know the correct response. Willa realizes he's an enemy and shoots him. Bob finally catches up with Willa. She points the gun at him and demands that he give her the secret countersign too. Bob manages to convince her that he's really her father. The two finally lower their weapons and have an emotional reunion. They hug, get into the car, and drive away together. But there's one more twist. Lockjaw actually survived the crash. Sometime later, Lockjaw shows up badly scarred and appears to be welcomed into the Christmas adventurers. But his story doesn't end there. The group eventually kills him by gassing him and then cremating his body. Back home, Bob gives Willa a letter from Perfidia. In the letter, Perfidia apologizes for everything she did and promises that she wants to reunite with her family someday. Later, Willa decides to leave home and join a protest in Oakland. Bob finally gives her his blessing and lets her go. After everything they've been through, Bob and Willa finally have a chance to move forward with their lives. The ensemble approach under Cassandra Kulukundis Paul, Thomas Anderson's collaboration with the casting director Cassandra Kulukundis, spans nearly 3 decades, beginning with her work as an unpaid intern on Hard Eight and continuing through every subsequent feature. For one battle after another, Kulukundis treated the process as an extension of that long partnership, approaching the script which Anderson had been refining for roughly 20 years. Drawing loosely from Thomas Pynchon's Vineland while incorporating original elements of revolutionary action and father daughter tension with an unusually open mandate. Anderson instructed her that the central teenage role of Willa Ferguson required someone who matched a specific DNA profile, mixed race, with one white parent and one black parent, and who could convey both vulnerability and lethal capability. Beyond that, the criteria remained deliberately broad. Doesn't matter if they've ever acted before, if they're a star, if I found them in school, if I find them on the street. The net was cast wide for performers between the ages of 12 and 25. Kulukundis began active searches as early as 2017, reading hundreds of candidates while Anderson continued developing the material. She visited martial arts studios and tournaments, inquired about mixed race athletes who could kickbox, and expanded the search to include gymnastics and dance. Early contenders aged out or lost interest over the years. Some who were 12 or 13 when first identified were revisited later. The process resembled assembling a quilt. Each successful placement informed the surrounding roles, ensuring tonal and physical cohesion across an ensemble that mixes established stars, rising talent, and non professionals. Once Leonardo DiCaprio attached as the lead, the timeline accelerated to roughly 6 or 7 months of intensive work, with the villa search already well advanced. The resulting cast includes Leonardo DiCaprio as the washed up revolutionary Bob Ferguson, also known as Ghetto Pat Calhoun, and Rocketman; Sean Penn as the corrupt military officer Colonel Stephen J. Lockjaw; Chase Infinity as Willa Ferguson, also Charlene Calhoun; Benicio Del Toro as Sensei Sergio San Carlos; Regina Hall as Deandra; Lady Champagne; Tiana Taylor as Perfidia Beverly Hills; Wood Harris as Laredo; Alana Haim as Mae West; Paul Grimstad as Howard Somerville; Billy Goat Gringo Coyote; Shayna McHale as Jungle Pussy; Tony Goldwyn as Virgil Throckmorton; and a large supporting group that includes D.W. Moffat, Kevin Teige, John Hugenecker, Eric Schweig, April Grace, Jim Downey, Starletta DuPos, and numerous others. The Christmas Adventurers Club members and various military, community, and revolutionary figures were filled with equal care, often favoring first time or lesser known performers, so that audiences would register the characters rather than the actors. Leonardo DiCaprio as Bob Ferguson, DiCaprio's attachment, provided the production's commercial and artistic anchor. Reports placed his fee at the standard $25 million he commands for major studio projects. He portrays a former explosives expert for the far left militant group known as the French 75. In the film's earlier timeline, he operates under the aliases Ghetto, Pat Calhoun, and Rocketman, participating in high risk operations such as breaking detainees out of immigration facilities. 16 years later, he lives off grid in the sanctuary city of Bacton Cross under the identity Bob Ferguson, raising his teenage daughter while existing in a state of stoned paranoia and residual revolutionary vigilance. The casting of DiCaprio aligned with Anderson's interest in pairing a major star with less familiar faces to generate specific chemistry dynamics. Chemistry reads with potential villas were conducted with DiCaprio's active participation. He was described as thoughtful and helpful throughout the process. His presence also influenced the surrounding ensemble. The French 75 members needed to feel like credible former comrades, while the antagonistic forces required sufficient gravity to threaten a figure of DiCaprio's stature. The role demanded physicality for action sequences and a capacity for both comedic stoner detachment and genuine paternal urgency qualities. DiCaprio has demonstrated across previous collaborations with directors who favor layered character work. Sean Penn as Colonel Stephen J. Lockjaw Sean Penn joined the cast in January 2024 alongside the confirmations of DiCaprio and Regina Hall. He plays the primary antagonist, a corrupt military officer whose obsession with the French 75 and particularly with perfidia drives much of the later conflict. In the earlier timeline, Lockjaw is humiliated during a detention center raid and later exploits information obtained from Perfidia to eliminate remaining group members. 16 years on, he has risen to colonel and seeks membership in the white supremacist Christmas Adventurers Club, a goal that requires him to erase evidence of his past interracial relationship and any resulting child. Penn's casting brought an intensity that matched the character's single minded pursuit. Kulukundis has noted the practical effect of his presence on set. Once fully in character as Lockjaw, he projected such menace that she avoided eye contact and crossed the street when he approached. The role required both physical authority and a capacity for controlled rage that could escalate into personal vendetta. Supporting military figures, including James Reitman as Colonel Danvers, Lockjaw's second in command, and various soldiers, were often drawn from actual military or law enforcement backgrounds to heighten authenticity around Penn's performance. The search for Willa and the casting of Chase Infinity, the role of Willa Ferguson, Charlene Calhoun, occupied the longest and most intensive portion of the casting process. Anderson and Kulukundis sought a performer who could embody a free spirited, self reliant teenager capable of handling fight choreography, operating a machine gun, driving while handcuffed, and holding the emotional center of the film opposite established stars. Physical demands were non negotiable. The character trains in karate with Sensei Sergio, and engages in high stakes confrontations. Kulukundis first encountered material on Chase Infinity, then a Chicago based student, kickboxing instructor, and member of a K pop dance crew through a manager's tip that included footage of her dancing. Infinity had no major feature credits at the time, though she later appeared in the Apple TV Plus series Presumed Innocent. Kulukundis requested a self tape in March 2023, then invited her for chemistry tests. The process stretched across 6 months and included multiple callbacks, camera tests, and reads opposite DiCaprio and Regina Hall. Infinity described the sessions as a masterclass, noting that even if she did not land the role, she would retain the experience. To confirm physical readiness, Kulukundis took Infinity to a gym and directed her to strike a heavy bag while screaming and grunting. The resulting footage was edited and sent to Anderson, who responded simply, "Thank you." Infinity, already experienced in kickboxing, underwent additional months of training in karate and mixed martial arts to prepare for her own stunts and intense scenes, with Penn Anderson ultimately offered her the part after she completed a 4-day intensive karate class. Chemistry with DiCaprio proved decisive. Among the many young actresses tested opposite him, Infinity consistently demonstrated the necessary rapport and ability to hold the frame. Kulukundis has emphasized the genetic and behavioral continuity between Infinity's Villa and Tayana Taylor's Perfidia, observing parallel silent reactions and physical presence that make the mother daughter relationship believable, even though the characters share limited screen time. Infinity's selection also satisfied the broader requirement that Villa feel like anybody who's right, regardless of prior credits. Her film debut in a central role opposite DiCaprio, Penn, and Del Toro became one of the production's most discussed outcomes. Teyana Taylor as Perfidia Beverly Hills. Teyana Taylor joined the cast in February 2024 as part of a group that also included Alana Haim, Wood Harris, Chase Infinity, and Shayna McHale. She portrays Perfidia Beverly Hills, a French 75 member, lover of Pat Bob, and biological mother of Willa Charlene. In the earlier timeline, Perfidia participates in raids, becomes pregnant, gives birth, then abandons the family to continue revolutionary activity. After a botched bank robbery, she is arrested, provides information to Lockjaw in exchange for avoiding prison, enters witness protection, and later flees to Mexico. A letter she leaves for her daughter surfaces late in the narrative. Kulukundis cast a wide net for the role, seeking a performer who could embody a force to be reckoned with, whose presence would inform the rest of the film. Taylor's background as a musician and dancer contributed to the physical and charismatic demands. One of the film's striking early images shows her firing a machine gun while pregnant. The casting prioritized an actress who could convey both revolutionary commitment and the personal contradictions that lead to betrayal and eventual regret. Continuity with Infinity's performance was a key consideration, ensuring that audiences would accept the familial link across the 16-year time jump. Regina Hall, as Deandra Regina Hall, was among the earliest confirmed cast members, announced with DiCaprio and Penn in January 2024. She plays Deandra, also known as Lady Champagne, a surviving French 75 member who remains active in the later timeline. Deandra rescues Willa during a school dance raid and brings her to a convent of revolutionary nuns, the Sisters of the Brave Beaver, inspired in part by the real Sisters of the Valley. She is later arrested while protecting Willa. Hall's casting provided a measured counterpoint to the more volatile revolutionary figures. Chemistry reads involving Hall and Infinity helped establish the protective dynamic between the older revolutionary and the teenager. Hall's established range in both dramatic and comedic registers suited a character who must navigate high stakes operations while maintaining a degree of pragmatism. Her presence also helped anchor the remaining French 75 members as a credible network capable of rapid response. Benicio Del Toro as Sensei Sergio San Carlos Benicio Del Toro's casting was confirmed in June 2024. He portrays Sergio San Carlos, Willa's karate sensei and a leader within the undocumented community in Bactan Cross. Sergio assists Bob after a raid, helps evacuate immigrants through hidden passages, and facilitates Bob's later escape. The role required both physical authority in martial arts sequences and a grounded community leadership presence. Del Toro arrived on set with limited preparation time after completing work on Wes Anderson's The Phoenician Scheme. He had approximately 10 days between projects to shift from one character to the next. The production schedule accommodated the conflict by pausing for 2.5 months. Del Toro's ability to drop into the role quickly aligned with Anderson's preference for performers who can operate within a fast moving, location based shoot. The character's dual function, martial arts instructor and community organizer, demanded a performer capable of conveying quiet competence under pressure. Supporting members of the French 75. The French 75 is populated by a mix of familiar and lesser known faces. Wood Harris plays Laredo, a group member whose presence contributes to the sense of a long standing collective. Alana Haim, previously directed by Anderson in Licorice Pizza, appears as Mae West. Paul Grimstad portrays Howard Somerville, also Billy Goat and Gringo Coyote, the member who supplies Pat and Charlene with new identities. Shayna McHale, known professionally in other contexts as Jungle Pussy, plays the character of the same name. Dijon appears as Talleyrand. Additional members include Dan Charreton as Comrade Josh, a role for which Jacob Batalon auditioned, and others who appear in operational sequences. These roles were cast to feel lived in rather than star driven. Kulukunji's favored performers who could disappear into the group dynamic so that the collective identity of the French 75 remained primary. Physical and vocal specificity mattered. Many sequences involve coordinated action or coded communication, including a greeting code voiced by Jenna Malone. The Christmas Adventurers Club and antagonistic supporting roles opposite the revolutionaries stand the Christmas Adventurers Club, a secretive, wealthy, white supremacist cabal. Tony Goldwyn plays Virgil Throckmorton, DW. Moffat appears as Bill Desmond, Kevin Teague as Roy Moore, Jim Downey as Sandy Irvine, and John Hugenacker as Tim Smith, the member dispatched to eliminate Lockjaw and Willa. Eric Schweig portrays the bounty hunter Avanti, who is hired to capture targets, and later experiences a change of heart regarding Willa. Kulukundis noted that assembling the adventurers required extensive reading to achieve a seamless group dynamic. The characters needed to project institutional power and casual menace without tipping into caricature. Supporting military and law enforcement roles often went to individuals with real world experience. James Retterman, a federal law enforcer, makes his screen debut as Colonel Danvers. Soldiers and security personnel were similarly drawn from authentic backgrounds where possible. Community, familial, and peripheral role Starletta Dupois plays Grandma Minnie, Perfidia's mother. April Grace appears as Sister Rochelle, Mother Superior of the Sisters of the Brave Beaver. Several real members of the Sisters of the Valley appear as the cannabis growing nuns. Tisha Sloan plays Willa's teacher. Smaller parts, bank security, witness protection officers, school dance attendees, immigrant soldiers, and local residents were frequently filled by non professionals or local talent, particularly during location shooting in Humboldt County, Sacramento, and elsewhere in California. Eureka High School students served as extras for the prom sequence. After Anderson and crew observed the actual prom for research into fashion and music trends. Humboldt County residents, including Carlos McFarland and Colton Gant, secured bit parts and background work through local casting calls. This approach extended to uncredited or minimally credited roles that populate detention facilities, streets, and community spaces. The goal was textural density. Every face on screen contributes to the sense of a lived in world rather than a constructed set. Timeline and practical constraints rumors of Anderson's next project circulating around Leonardo DiCaprio, Regina Hall, Viggo Mortensen, and Joaquin Phoenix surfaced by mid 2023, with Warner Bros. Securing the film. Official confirmations arrived in stages: DiCaprio, Hall, and Penn in January 2024, Haim, Harris, Infinity, Mikhail, and Taylor in February, Del Toro in June. Principal photography ran from January to June 2024 across California locations: Humboldt County, Sacramento, Anza Borrego, Lompoc, San Diego area, and El Paso, Texas, using VistaVision. Scheduling conflicts, including Del Toro's commitment to another film and industry strikes that delayed some audition stages, required flexibility. Kulukundis remained on location ahead of the company to assess local talent and maintain continuity with Anderson's working methods. Physical and emotional demands. Across the cast, many roles carried physical requirements beyond standard dramatic performance. Infinity trained extensively for fight work and stunts. Taylor's early sequences involved handling weapons while portraying pregnancy. Del Toro's Sensi character demanded credible martial arts demonstration. Action set pieces involving car chases, rooftop escapes, raids, and shootouts required coordination among principal and supporting players. Emotional demands were equally specific. DiCaprio's arc moves from revolutionary competence to paranoid paternal protectiveness, Penn's from institutional power to personal unraveling, Infinity's from teenage resentment to resourceful survival, Taylor's from militant commitment to compromised regret. Kulukundis' long familiarity with Anderson's sets informed her choices. She has described spending time with every performer who appears on screen, using location work to read local possibilities, and balancing star power with unfamiliar faces so that the ensemble never settles into predictable hierarchies. The result is a cast that supports both the film's large scale action and its intimate father daughter core, with each major role calibrated against the others through chemistry tests, physical evaluations, and iterative reading. The process rewarded patience, especially in the multi year search for Villa, and a willingness to consider candidates from martial arts gyms, dance crews, local communities, and established Hollywood ranks with equal seriousness. One battle after another 2025, production and reception, production development, and pre production, Paul Thomas Anderson had flirted with the idea of turning Thomas Pynchon's 1990 novel Vineland into a film for more than 2 decades before One Battle After Another finally came together. For years, he set the project aside, worried that his affection for the book would make it impossible to adapt it with any objectivity. Rather than force a straight adaptation, he began developing two separate, unrelated concepts on his own, a high speed chase thriller and a story centered on a female revolutionary. Over time, those two threads merged, and elements of Vineland, especially its focus on a fractured father daughter relationship, were folded back in to give the combined story its emotional spine. Word that Anderson had a new film in the pipeline first broke in mid 2023 when reports linked the then untitled project to Warner Brothers and floated Leonardo DiCaprio, Regina Hall, Viggo Mortensen, and Joaquin Phoenix as possible cast members. By January 2024, DiCaprio and Hall were confirmed, joined shortly after by Sean Penn. DiCaprio was reported to have taken his usual quote of roughly $25 million dollars for the role. The following month, Alana Haim, Wood Harris, Chase Infinity, Shayna McHale, and Teyana Taylor were added to the ensemble, with Benicio Del Toro's involvement confirmed that June. Actor Jacob Batalon later said he had auditioned for a supporting role that ultimately went to another performer. Casting the pivotal role of teenager Willa Ferguson took considerably longer than filling out the rest of the ensemble. Chase Infinity spent roughly 6 months working through callbacks, camera tests, and chemistry reads opposite DiCaprio and Hall before landing the part. She has described the process as intense but rewarding, saying the experience alone would have been worth it even without booking the role. Because Infinity had no prior screen acting credits, her background was in kickboxing instruction. She spent months training in karate and mixed martial arts so she could perform her own stunts and hold her own in physically demanding scenes opposite Penn. Casting director Cassandra Kulukundis has said Anderson gave her an unusually open brief for the part, telling her that age, acting experience, and how the actress was discovered didn't matter, so long as she was somewhere between 12 and 25. Kulukundis narrowed the search once she recognized how central the character's physicality would be to the performance, and has said Infinity's screen presence and chemistry with DiCaprio set her apart once test scenes began. Filming principal photography began in California in January 2024 under the working title BC Project. The shoot opened with 11 days of filming spread across several Humboldt County communities, including Arcata, Cotton, Eureka, Kneeland, and Trinidad. To ground the film's depiction of an off grid, anti-authoritarian religious community, the production consulted with members of the real-life group Sisters of the Valley, who inspired the fictional Sisters of the Brave Beaver seen on screen. Anderson and his crew also attended a prom at Eureka High School to study contemporary teen fashion and music, and several students from the school ended up appearing as extras in a key dance scene. In early February, the production relocated to Sacramento, filming at the county administration building and courthouse. That stage of the shoot drew local controversy after a homeless encampment was cleared from a park to make way for filming. For exterior shots representing the headquarters of the film's secret Christmas Adventurers Club, the crew used the former Sacramento residence of Governor Ronald Reagan, a deliberate nod back to Pynchon's novel, which repeatedly engages with Reagan era politics. Filming then paused for roughly 2.5 months because Benicio Del Toro was committed to Wes Anderson's The Phoenician scheme, which was shooting concurrently. Del Toro has said he had only about 10 days between wrapping one production and stepping into the other, comparing it to trying to jump onto a moving carousel without a running start. Once he rejoined the cast, production moved quickly. Later, location work took the crew to Anza Borrego Desert State Park and Borrego Springs in May 2024 and to El Paso, Texas, including scenes shot on the city's streetcar system the following month. Additional filming took place at La Purísima Mission, San Diego's Westgate Hotel, and locations in and around Otay Mesa near the US Mexico border. Cinematographer Michael Bauman shot the film on 35mm using VistaVision cameras. His third collaboration with Anderson after Phantom Thread and Licorice Pizza. Roughly three quarters of the finished film was captured in the format, which had gone largely unused since the 1950s and 60s, aside from a brief prior revival in Brady Corbett's The Brutalist. Bauman has said Anderson pushed for a visual language rooted in 1970s American cinema, citing the French Connection and The Last Detail as touchstones, and that the stylistic roughness of that era was essential to how the story needed to feel. Unlike the more static, tripod based photography associated with earlier VistaVision revivals, Bauman said this film needed constant motion, handheld camera work, steadicam, and rigs mounted directly to moving vehicles. He has described the shoot as demanding, partly because so much of it took place on real locations rather than sound stages, leaving little room for controlled conditions. According to Bauman, VistaVision's core technical advantage is that it runs film horizontally through the camera at 8 perforations per frame rather than the 4 perforation vertical feed of standard 35mm, roughly doubling the size of each negative and producing a notably richer image. The production used the format extensively. By Bauman's account, around 1.5 million feet of film ran through the cameras, an unusually heavy workload for a system that hadn't been used at that scale in decades. The format proved especially suited to the film's major set pieces, including its climactic highway car chase. Location manager Michael Glazier is credited with finding the stretch of road used for that sequence somewhat by chance while scouting a separate location. To capture the chase's energy, Bauman worked with veteran stunt coordinator and second unit specialist Alan Paddleford, using specialized camera car rigs built for high speed action work. For the film's color palette and lighting design, Bauman and Anderson looked to the work of Wong Kar-wai and to Jonathan Demme's The Silence of the Lambs. The two reportedly kept a physical print of the French Connection with them throughout the shoot, screening it periodically during dailies to keep the visual approach consistent. Cinematographer Giovanni Ribisi, who has restored vintage VistaVision cameras as a personal project, is thanked in the film's end credits for lending restored equipment to the production. Post-production editing was handled by Andy Jorgensen, a frequent Anderson collaborator who had previously cut Licorice Pizza. Jorgensen has spoken about the challenge of assembling the film extended car chase sequence, which was shot over several days without traditional storyboards. Anderson reportedly worked from a general sense of how the sequence should begin, develop, and end rather than a fixed shot list. Jorgensen compiled footage from multiple camera angles and gradually narrowed it down to the strongest material, building much of the sequence's tension around close shots of Willa's eyes as she checks her mirrors. He has said the edit continued evolving well into the final sound mix and that the sequence consistently tested as an audience favorite during screenings. Jurgensen was present on location throughout the shoot, reviewing dailies with Anderson on a vintage horizontal VistaVision projector borrowed from Warner Bros. He has said being embedded with the crew during production rather than working remotely from an editing bay gave him a better understanding of what everyone on set was going through, something he described as characteristic of how Anderson likes to work. Budget reporting on the film shifted considerably over its production and release cycle. Variety reported in February 2024 that the project had been greenlit at around $115 million. By August of that year, the Wall Street Journal put the figure above $140 million, noting that Anderson's previous highest grossing film, There Will Be Blood, had only made $76 million domestically with Warner Brothers. Executives reportedly justifying the higher spend based on DiCaprio's box office draw. By the time of the film's release in 2025, Variety cited a final budget of $175 million, while Warner Bros. Itself put the figure at $130 million, making it the most expensive production of Anderson's career, regardless of which number is used. Deadline. Hollywood separately reported that below the line costs for the California shoot came to roughly $101.6 million, offset by an $8.4 million state tax credit. Marketing spend was reported separately at around $70 million, and Variety later reported an additional $14 million spent on the film's award season campaign. Beginning in January 2025, the film underwent audience test screenings, the first time Anderson had agreed to that process since Boogie Nights in 1997. Based on audience feedback, roughly 8 to 10 minutes were trimmed from the film. Jurgensen has described the trims as part of the studio's normal process rather than a sign of major creative friction, saying Warner Brothers did not push for radical changes. According to Jurgensen, Anderson generally dislikes testing his films, but agreed partly out of curiosity about whether the film's comedy was landing, given how much of the material touches on sensitive racial and political territory. He has said the screenings confirmed the humor was working and helped the filmmakers gauge how far certain jokes could be pushed, and that the studio's response to the test audiences was supportive rather than restrictive. The film's title was officially confirmed in March 2025 alongside a teaser trailer. The production marked the sixth collaboration between Anderson and composer Johnny Greenwood, and also the sixth between Anderson and first assistant director and producer Adam Somner, who died in November 2024. The finished film is dedicated to his memory. Music Johnny Greenwood, the Radiohead guitarist who has scored several of Anderson's previous films, composed the score, recording it with the London Contemporary Orchestra under conductor Hugh Brunt. Nonesuch Records released the soundtrack on September 26, 2025, timed to the film's wide release. The film also features two songs written by John Bryan, marking his first collaboration with Anderson since Punch Drunk Love in 2002. Rawlish's theatrical Warner Bros. Spent roughly $70 million marketing the film. DiCaprio launched his own YouTube channel in March 2025 to debut the first teaser and extended footage screened for exhibitors during Warner Bros. Presentation at CinemaCon that April. A second trailer followed in July, alongside an announcement that the film would receive a tie-in experience within Fortnite Creative. The marketing campaign also included a run of meme-style social posts built around out-of-context clips from the film. Several critics and outlets described the overall campaign as unusually scattered or confusing. Warner Bros.' co-head of global motion picture marketing, Dana Nussbaum, defended the approach as necessarily adaptive, arguing that a modern campaign has to shift quickly based on how audiences are responding rather than sticking to a single fixed strategy. The film had originally been scheduled for an August 2025 release before being pushed back to accommodate a fuller awards season rollout. It premiered at the TCL Chinese Theater in Los Angeles on September 8, 2025, followed by a global promotional tour that stopped in London, Mexico City, and finally New York before the film's wide release. It also screened at Fantastic Fest in Austin later that month. Warner Brothers released the film in the US on September 26, 2025, following preview screenings 2 days earlier, marking the first time an Anderson film had been distributed in IMAX, given its VistaVision origins. The film received a limited run in the format itself at a handful of specialty venues, including the Vista Theater in Los Angeles, a Regal location in New York's Union Square, the Coolidge Corner Theater outside Boston, and the Odeon Lux Leicester Square in London. Beyond that specialty run, it played more broadly in 4DX, Digital IMAX, Dolby Vision, IMAX 70mm, and standard 70mm presentations. In June 2026, it also received a one-off 35mm screening at the New Beverly Cinema in Los Angeles. Following the film's strong showing in that year's Academy Award nominations, it briefly returned to select IMAX 70mm screens as part of the associated publicity push Home Media One Battle After. Another became available for digital purchase and rental on November 14, 2025, roughly 7 weeks after its theatrical debut. It began streaming on HBO Max on December 19, 2025, and according to the tracking firm Flix Patrol, became the most streamed film on the platform within its first 4 days there, ranking as the service's top title globally by December 23. The film reached UK HBO Max subscribers as well as viewers on Now and Sky Cinema in late March 2026 and became available on Jio Hotstar in India that February. Physical media followed on January 20, 2026, with simultaneous releases on 4K Ultra HD Blu-ray, Standard Blu-ray, and DVD. A collectible steelbook edition arrived several months later on June 10, 2026, a package with a substantial set of bonus features overseen by Anderson himself, camera, lighting, and costume tests, a screen test featuring Chase Infinity, a full-length behind-the-scenes documentary, a dedicated look at the editing process, footage from the film's opening night at the Vista Theater, and an accompanying 24-page photo booklet. The film's commercial afterlife took an unusual turn following its sweep at the 98th Academy Awards in March 2026. Despite already being available on HBO Max, the film saw a fresh surge in premium video on demand purchases through the Apple TV Store. Flix Patrol reported it reached the top of the US iTunes chart by mid March 2026 and simultaneously topped charts in 33 other countries. Reception box office One Battle After another grossed roughly $72.9 million across the United States and Canada and about $140.2 million internationally for a worldwide total of approximately $213. 1 million, making it Anderson's highest grossing release to date. Against at a break-even point estimated near $300 million, however, the film's performance was widely characterized as a box office disappointment relative to its cost. Domestically, it opened in 3,634 theaters, the widest release of any Anderson film and his first true wide release opening. It earned $8.8 million on its opening day, including $3.1 million from Thursday preview screenings, and went on to gross $22 million over its opening weekend, enough to top the domestic box office and easily surpass the previous best opening weekend for an Anderson film. The $4.9 million There Will Be Blood earned in its fifth weekend back in 2008. In its second weekend, the film's gross fell by half to $11 million, dropping it to second place behind the newly released concert film Taylor Swift, the official release party of a showgirl. Critical reaction was overwhelmingly positive from the outset, with a number of reviewers describing the film outright as a masterpiece. On Rotten Tomatoes, 94% of 441 critics' reviews are positive, with an average score of 8.9 out of 10. The site's consensus describes the film as an entertaining, thematically rich epic packed with striking action sequences. Metacritic assigned the film a weighted score of 95 out of 100 based on 63 reviews, denoting universal acclaim. Audiences surveyed by CinemaScore gave the film an average grade of A, while post-track respondents rated it 4.5 out of 5 stars, with about three-quarters saying they would definitely recommend it to others. Individual reviews echoed the aggregate scores. Variety's Owen Gleiberman praised the film's urgency and its ability to keep audiences guessing about where the story was headed. Brian Tallarico of Roger Ebert Com called it a timeless story of resistance that blends echoes of the real life weather underground with more classical depictions of rebellion, while still functioning as a propulsive moving character piece. Justin Chang of The New Yorker singled out the father daughter relationship at the story's center as unusually personal and emotionally binding, despite the characters sharing relatively few scenes together. Katie Walsh of the Chicago Tribune described the film as a pointed critique of the current moment in American life, balanced against its more intimate family drama. Manohla Dargis of the New York Times framed it as a sprawling, carnival like epic about power, injustice, and love that ultimately gestures toward hope for the future. Richard Lawson of The Hollywood Reporter praised what he saw as a newly discovered gift for suspense and action filmmaking on Anderson's part, even as the film wrestles with much larger ideas about national decline. Peter Bradshaw of The Guardian awarded the film 5 stars, highlighting Anderson's continued engagement with themes of counterculture and counter revolution and praising Greenwood's score. Performances drew particular attention. Gleiberman argued that comedy is what liberates DiCaprio as a performer and that casting him as a disheveled, faith shaken stoner allowed for an unusually humanizing performance. Tallarico felt DiCaprio's work was carefully controlled but reserved his highest praise for Sean Penn, calling it his best performance in years and crediting him with balancing menace against absurdity without tipping into caricature. David Sims of The Atlantic similarly praised Penn's willingness to make his fascistic character both frightening and inherently ridiculous, while describing DiCaprio's Bob as a sympathetic, exhausted figure rather than a comic buffoon. David Ehrlich of IndieWire highlighted newcomer Chase Infinity's screen presence, along with strong performances from Penn and Teyana Taylor, whom he described as burning with revolutionary intensity. Deadline's Pete Hammond likewise praised Penn's performance as riotous fun and called Taylor's turn dazzling. Not every review was glowing. William Bibiani of The Wrap found the plot unfocused and overlong and argued the film settled for cheap shots at real world political targets rather than genuinely engaging with them. Kyle Smith of the Wall Street Journal described the film as brash and overstuffed, suggesting a single viewing wasn't enough to fully absorb everything it was attempting, and that whether it amounted to a masterpiece or a mess would remain debatable. Liel Leibovitz of the Free Press was far more dismissive, framing the film's acclaim as evidence of a broader creative and moral decline in Hollywood, and National Review critic Armand White went so far as to call the film openly seditious. The film also drew attention and praise from fellow filmmakers. During a post screening conversation, Steven Spielberg called the film insane and incredible and remarked that its themes felt more relevant by the time of its release than they likely were when Anderson had first written and shot it. Francis Ford Coppola, Michael Mann, and Paul Schrader also praised the film publicly. Producer Sarah Murphy expressed hope that its critical and commercial reception might encourage other studios to back similarly ambitious original projects. The film's political content became a recurring subject of debate. Some commentators on the right characterized it as sympathetic to left wing political violence, while others on the left embraced it as a rare mainstream studio film willing to directly confront authoritarianism. Writing in the New York Times, Michelle Goldberg described it as an anti fascist film, arriving at what she called a fascist moment, noting that it had actually been made before Donald Trump's return to office and questioning whether a similarly forthright film could get made in Hollywood today. Writer and podcaster Bret Easton Ellis argued that the film's acclaim had more to do with its alignment with left leaning sensibilities than its craftsmanship, a view echoed to some degree by National Review's Armand White. Gleiberman pushed back on the broader political framing, arguing that the film's critique of authoritarian power isn't inherently a left wing position, and that treating it as such misreads what the film is actually doing. Commentators also connected the film's plot, centered on aggressive immigration enforcement and a raid on a detention facility, to real world debates around US immigration policy, even though the film never names immigration and customs enforcement directly. Producer Sarah Murphy said in February 2026 that real world immigration enforcement operations occurring around that time had made the film's themes feel unexpectedly and uncomfortably immediate. Separately, in January 2026, a writer for the American Prospect drew a direct comparison between the film's antagonist and a real US Border Patrol commander known for aggressive enforcement tactics. The character of Perfidia Beverly Hills, played by Teyana Taylor, generated its own strand of critical discussion. Some critics, including Eleni Jones of The Guardian, questioned how the film, directed by a white filmmaker, handles the sexualization of its central black female character by two white men over the course of the story. Others, including Maya Phillips of the New York Times, read the character more as the film's most radical element, arguing that her arc ties the fate of the story's political movement to black women's sexual autonomy. Taylor herself pushed back publicly on criticism of the character on multiple occasions, arguing that Perfidia's sexuality is something she actively wields against the men around her rather than a passive trait, and framing the character's more self destructive choices as products of post war trauma and the specific pressures placed on black women expected to embody unwavering strength. Anderson addressed the character directly during the Academy Awards, describing Perfidia as a deliberately flawed, complicated figure whose unresolved struggles were meant to set up Willa's arc as the next generation, trying to do better with a difficult inheritance. The film appeared prominently on year end best of lists. The American Film Institute and National Board of Review both named it one of the 10 best films of 2025, and it topped separate year end polls conducted by Film Comment, the New York Times, and Sight and Sound. It also topped IndieWire's annual critics poll, drawing the most points of any film that year, with roughly two-thirds of participating critics including it somewhere on their top 10 ballots. In a separate IndieWire survey of working filmmakers, 20 of 50 respondents named it among their favorite films of the year, including directors Fede Alvarez, Olivia Assayas, Clint Bentley, Oliver Lax, and Michael Mann. Rolling Stone's David Fear called it a dizzying, thundering epic and included performances by both Penn and Taylor on his list of the year's best. Overall, the film reportedly appeared on more critics' year end lists than any other 2025 release, drawing the highest number of number one placements of any title that year. It was also included without formal ranking at the top of former US. President Barack Obama's annual list of favorite films. That critical momentum translated into a substantial awards run. At the Critics' Choice Awards, the film won three prizes, including Best Picture and Best Director for Anderson. It led the Golden Globes with 9 nominations and won 4, including Best Motion Picture Musical or Comedy, Best Director, Best Screenplay, and a Best Supporting Actress win for Taylor. At the Screen Actors Guild's Actor Awards, it set a record with 7 nominations and secured a win for Penn in the Supporting Actor category. It led the British Academy Film Awards with 14 nominations and won 6, including Best Film and Best Director. At the 98th Academy Awards, the film received 13 nominations and won 6. Best Picture, Best Director, Best Supporting Actor for Penn, Best Adapted Screenplay, Best Film Editing, and the inaugural Best Casting Award. Adam Somner, credited as a producer, became only the second person in Oscar history to win Best Picture posthumously. In the months following the film's award success, Taylor spoke publicly about her interest in a potential follow-up centered on Perfidia's story, describing conversations with Anderson about the idea as serious and ongoing. She has floated the possibility of using unused footage from the original production alongside new material to fill in the 16-year gap the story otherwise leaves unexplored, and has expressed hope that any future installment would eventually bring Perfidia and Willa together on screen. Paul Thomas Anderson, Leonardo DiCaprio, Project Review. Paul Thomas Anderson and Leonardo DiCaprio finally team up, and the result is a 10-10 masterpiece. One of Leonardo DiCaprio's biggest career regrets, and one of the biggest casting what ifs of all time, was the actor's near miss playing Dirk Diggler in Paul Thomas Anderson's Boogie Nights. One battle after another, the latest film from PTA, and one which finally teams the writer, director, and actor, may not be a time machine. But like Boogie Nights, it goes hard. Boogie Nights is one of my favorite movies of all time. My dad recorded it off of HBO in the late 90s, and when he and my mom went to sleep, I would sneak downstairs, snag the tape, and quietly watch in my room over and over. I'm not sure what came first, my love of movies or my love of Boogie Nights. Now, P.T. Anderson is back with One Battle After Another, a film I'm so excited for. I rewatched most of his back catalog and read the book it's loosely based on. Time well spent. Despite the absurdly high expectations I set for this movie, Paul Thomas Anderson's first $100 must budget delivers an S tier PTA flick about a stoner ex extremist trying to reunite with his daughter before a colonel with a penchant for martial law and secrets to hide can get to her first. One battle after another, the plot. The film follows DiCaprio's Bob Ferguson, a former lefty revolutionary who is raising his daughter Willa Chase Infinity. He's been living in hiding ever since things went bad with his revolutionary group, the French 75, years earlier. One battle opens with the group's backstory, with one of its leaders, Perfidia Beverly Hills, Tayana Taylor, exclaiming, "Free borders, free choices, free from fear," before they forcibly release all the detainees in a detention facility near the Mexican border. That line pretty much sums up the French 75's politics, who spend the rest of the first act robbing banks and blowing up buildings as a means to that end. Things move pretty quickly here. Think Bonnie and Clyde, Wild at Heart, Queen and Slim. The old romantic outlaws plot on fast forward. There's a lot of sex and violence, but with a twist. Perfidia may be hot and heavy with Leo's Bob, but there's also a simmering dom sub sexual tension building between her and Cole. Stephen J. Lockjaw, Sean Penn, who has had the hots for her ever since he got a massive erection while she held him up during the detention liberation scene. Paul Thomas Anderson has hit another high point of his career. That sexual tension ultimately pays off in one of the strangest sex scenes I've seen in a while. It's kind of like that sex scene in The Sopranos between Richie Aprile and Janice, but the roles are reversed. You know the one. I've actually got a lot to say about this scene, but we'll get to that later. Anyway, the freewheeling rebellion of the French 75 ultimately comes to an end after a botched bank robbery and Perfidia's arrest, which sends everyone into hiding. 16 years later, Lockjaw is back on the hunt for Bob and his daughter, but when Willa goes missing, Bob has to battle with his past and years of substance abuse in his quest to reunite with his daughter. The performances. Perfidia. I'm trying not to give away the whole movie here, just enough for context and to highlight what really makes this plot sing. The performances. We need to start with Tayana Taylor's Perfidia Beverly Hills, who owns the first act and is the kind of femme fatale that would make Faye Dunaway and Sharon Stone blush. Taylor's performance goes far deeper than just being a smoke show, who brings out the worst in Bob and Lockjaw. This is especially true after she has Willa, as the actress does an incredible job of externalizing Perfidia's struggles with depression, guilt, and the loss of the individual autonomy that comes with starting a family. When she tells Bob, "I put myself first," and storms out, you understand why. And when she regrets her decisions later in the film, you feel for her then too. The end of one battle and how it tugs on your heartstrings wouldn't be nearly as effective if it weren't for Taylor's performance. Willa, you know what they say, like mother, like daughter. Chase Infinity's Willa is the heart and soul of the film. Unfortunately, for the purposes of this review, some of Infinity's best scenes are really spoiler laden. But one that isn't is Infinity's first moment on screen with Leo. You know the scene, the responsible child scolding the irresponsible parent, but this one is written by PTA. One of the biggest laughs in my theater came when Bob responds to Willa's grilling with, "I know how to drink and drive. I know what I'm doing." They bicker for sure, but it's clear they care for each other, which Bob shows by threatening her friends in that fatherly way, while also casually insulting them as they pick her up for the high school dance. It's moments like these that give one battle after another its soul. This is a very politically charged film, but it can also transcend the politics and remind the audience that this story, at its core, is about a father trying to connect with his daughter, Bob. Bob Ferguson is an odd mix of Leo's previous characters. Think of Bob as a cross between the Wolf of Wall Street's Jordan Belfort and his love of drugs, and Killers of the Flower Moon's Ernest Burkhart and his stupidity. Bob genuinely loves his daughter, but he's not the brightest bulb. Dimmer now, thanks to decades of drugs and alcohol, which is unfortunate because he's being hunted. There's a great ongoing bit throughout the film that's heavily featured in the trailer with Bob on a payphone talking to someone from the resistance, but he can't remember the super secret password. After multiple interactions with the mysterious voice, Bob goes full Karen, essentially demanding to speak to a manager. This all ends up being a very funny button to his plotline. But Leo's performance as a degenerate fuck up revolutionary isn't all about laughs. He's got heart too, especially when he connects with Benicio Del Toro's Sensei Sergio. Sensei Sergio San Carlos. In the production notes for the film, Leo refers to Sensei Sergio St. Carlos as Bob's Obi-Wan, and it's kind of true in a PTA way. And while he does help Bob out and is a rebellious do-gooder himself, Del Toro's character isn't in the film as much as the trailers would lead you to believe. There's one scene where he and Bob are sharing some road sodas while Bob is being really vulnerable about Willa. That continues to elevate the story above today's contemporary political environment. But just because it's heartfelt doesn't mean it's not funny. It's the scene that culminates with Del Toro's means no fear, like Tom Cruise moment. Great line call. Stephen J. Lockjaw. If this film has an Obi-Wan, it must also have a Darth Vader, so enter Sean Penn. Like the Sith Lord, Penn as Lockjaw is also despicably evil and absolutely captivating. Part pervert, part right-wing military psychopath, Penn plays Lockjaw, kind of like a mix of a few good men's call, Nathan R. Jessup and General Jack D. Ripper from Doctor Strangelove. But instead of being obsessed with our precious bodily fluids, he's more concerned with the semen demon. There's a scene where he's being recruited to join a cabal of ultra rich white nationalists. He's clearly nervous, so the colonel decides to comb his hair by awkwardly licking his comb. It's a moment that shows some of the insecurities bubbling under the surface of Call, Stephen J. Lockjaw, the Pynchon and politics of it all. The Christmas Adventurers Club. What kind of goofy club is that? It sounds like something out of a Thomas Pynchon novel. Well, it's not, but it sounds like it could be. It's no secret that this movie is a loose adaptation of Pynchon's 1990 novel Vineland. This would be PTA's second Pynchon movie after 2011's Inherent Vice, but One Battle feels more along the lines of how There Will Be Blood is an adaptation of Oil by Upton Sinclair, even while being a looser adaptation than that work was. PTA's adaptation preserves most of the ways that the characters connected, but strips away all the novel's socio-political context. Vineland's Brock Vaughan and his war on drugs at the behest of the Reagan administration is replaced with Call, Lockjaw's war on immigration and his willingness to enact martial law at the behest of a secret society of rich, white Americans who are pulling the strings of the government in an attempt to keep the US safe and pure. And Vineland's 24 FPS collective has been replaced with the French 75 revolutionaries who believe in free borders, free choices, free from fear. One battle after another draws a clear line in the sand. Politically, there's no such thing as a neutral bystander, and every character in this film has picked a side. They are either part of the revolutionaries, trying to help the downtrodden, or they help the secret elite cabal trying to bring about a racially pure America. But having heavy stakes like that doesn't mean PTA doesn't try to adapt some of Pynchon's absurdist humor. There's an order of nuns called Sisters of the Brave Beaver who train revolutionaries and grow weed. As for the Christmas Adventurers Club, that's the guild of calamitous intent that Lockjaw is trying to join. How fun! And they greet each other by saying, Hail Saint Nick, an almost childish auditory take on Hail Satan. But you know what? It works. PTA's instinct to take only the parts he liked from Vineland and fill in the rest is definitely the right move, especially for a $100 M plus movie. A straightforward adaptation of Vineland probably wouldn't have netted a better film, and certainly wouldn't have made for a more accessible one. One battle after another draws a clear line in the sand. Politically, there is no such thing as a neutral bystander. And for those of you who, like me, read Vineland to prep, good news! Your time wasn't wasted. This movie will make much more sense right from the jump. For those that haven't, you might get a little lost with everything going on in the first act. It sets up a lot, but it'll all make sense, especially on repeat viewings. The man of the hour And now for the man of the hour, the writer, the director, Paul Thomas Anderson. To be blunt, I am still in awe that this film actually exists. It's so much fun to watch while also telling a timeless story about what a father would go through to protect his daughter. And PTA does all this while making an incisive commentary on America's current political climate. Let us not forget that he does all of this while managing to make his most expensive movie to date of original IP, no less. One battle after another is estimated to have cost between $130 M and $175 M. PTA's biggest earner, There Will Be Blood, which only brought in 70 plus at the box office, cost $25 M. And you can see that budget on the screen. There's not one, but two car chases, and each is distinct, with the climactic one proving particularly memorable. I can't recall hills used in a car chase to such dramatic effect, and the filmmaker creates a whole chase out of oscillating roads, building tension in a way that would make Alfred Hitchcock proud. The oscillating rhythm as the car goes in and out of sight is an incredible visual foreshadowing of how Villa will ultimately fight back. I won't say more. But it takes more than a car chase and some fat stacks to hold my attention for not quite, but almost 3 hours. We are so lucky that PTA decided to make his blank check movie 30 years into his career. This movie's pacing relies on narrative tricks he developed on his older, cheaper movies like Magnolia and Boogie Nights. As with those movies, one battle after another also starts in a frantic burst of exposition. Scenes are short, and the camera basically never stops moving, allowing PTA to cover a lot of narrative ground quickly. However, as the plot thickens, with Anderson spending time letting layers of character drama peel away, scenes take longer. He thus has to rely on editing to convey a juxtaposition of thematic elements to keep audiences enticed. Look at Magnolia. The film starts with a rapid telling of three unrelated deaths to convey its focus on coincidence before setting up the plot lines of all the characters and how all their seemingly unrelated stories will eventually affect each other. PTA employs these speedy narrative hacks in one battle after another, albeit this time with more expensive stunts and action to set up the French 75's history. But once the group disbands, he uses the Magnolia editing technique to create interesting juxtapositions. For example, take the contrast of Bob's parent teacher conference with Lockjaw's conditional acceptance into the Christmas adventurers. Both are moments of pride for the men. To be clear, this is what a director working at his peak looks like. One battle after another is, without a doubt, amazing. But is it a masterpiece? The verdict. Frankly, when trying to come up with my final score for this movie, I've spent an absurd amount of time trying to figure out the difference between a 9 out of 10 and a 10 out of 10. What does an abstract one better mean? Then it hit me. Who says our review scale is linear, with each number being equally spaced from the other? We are measuring art with numbers, for Christ's sake. It's all a construction we've collectively made up. So let me ask, what if the gaps between the numbers in the middle of the spectrum, 5 to 6, 6 to 7, etc., are larger than the quality gap between the numbers at the end of the spectrum? We may not care much about the nuanced improvements between an unbearable 1 and a painful 2, but we can probably agree they are slight. And if the differences are slight at one end of the spectrum, then logic reasons that the differences are also slight on the other. The point I'm trying to make here is that the elements that separate an amazing film from a masterpiece are minor. Know that this 10 I'm about to drop does not come lightly. There are so many subtle things that make this film just that much better. Take that sex scene that I hinted at earlier. PTA uses a Scorsese-esque needle drop of Soldier Boy by the Shirelles as Perfidia holds Lockjaw's own gun to his back as she pleasures him. The director then smash cuts to an extremely pregnant Perfidia shooting a machine gun. At first glance, you could argue that the sequence is vulgar, but it's not. It's PTA in perfect control of his characters and the tone. The same could be said for the Steely Dan dirty work needle drop, as we are introduced to a teenage Villa and her dad's parent teacher conference prep of smoking dope in the car. Steely's easy listening. Yacht rock tone perfectly embodies the vibe of their exile, but the lyrics hint at something else. Even the things PTA whole cloth invented for the film, like the harmony transponders, Bob forgetting the code words, The Christopher Reeve Superman poster in Sensei Sergio's dojo, Seaman Demon, the car chases, the stunt fall off a building down a tree. There are so many little details, seemingly inconsequential touches, the filmmaker's style, if you will, that all add up bit by bit to turn this amazing movie into a masterpiece. Paul Thomas Anderson Leonardo DiCaprio project. One battle after another review. Comments. Exclusive. One battle after another cast interviews. Coming to theaters on September 26 from Warner Bros. Is Paul Thomas Anderson's One Battle After Another, starring Leonardo DiCaprio, Benicio Del Toro, Sean Penn, Regina Hall, Wood Harris, Tiana Taylor, Alana Haim, Chase Infinity, D.W. Moffat, John Hugnecker, April Grace, Anthony Snow, Starletta Dupois, Jim Anderson, and Shayna McHale. Inspired by Thomas Pynchon's postmodern 1990 novel Vineland. When their evil enemy resurfaces after 16 years, a group of ex-revolutionaries reunites to rescue one of their own's daughter. BlackFilmAndTV.com's Wilson Morales talks to Leonardo DiCaprio, Tiana Taylor, Chase Infinity, Benicio Del Toro, and Regina Hall on Paul Thomas Anderson's One Battle After Another. Exclusive. Dead of Winter cast interviews with Emma Thompson and Judy Greer. Exclusive. Samora Smallwood talks Lifetime's Murder at the Hotel and her rom-com miniseries Coming Home. One battle after another review. One battle after another. One battle after another, it's called, and that's no word of a lie. It begins with an attack, an announcement, an ambush, and then barely lets up at all. There is an opening half hour of militant revolution, and then 2 hours of brutal, scrappy fallout. Its central fugitive, Pat, Leonardo DiCaprio, lost in a weed fug amid kidnappings and breakouts and car chases, and a sensei played by Benicio Del Toro. This pussy ain't for fun. The guns is the fucking fun, says the firebrand fueling the chaos. Perfidia Beverly Hills, Tiana Taylor, a Molotov cocktail in human form. For Paul Thomas Anderson, the filmmaking is the fucking fun, and never more so than here. There is a lot going on, and not an ounce of fat on it. Inspired, as the credits inform us, by Thomas Pynchon's countercultural opus Vineland, or at least bits of it. Anderson has cooked up his own take on the great American novel, a sweeping yet intimate epic, filtered through a charged contemporary lens. Revolution, immigration, corruption, white supremacy. Basically, the absolute state of things. People with good intentions, people with bad intentions, all crashing against each other sexually, morally, violently. PTA has a lot to say, but never with a sledgehammer, never on a soapbox, and never to the detriment of entertainment. It's a blast from start to finish. And there are many blasts within. A rogues gallery of misfits and miscreants populate it. What a mess they make. Almost all of the characters here are, or at least ultimately become, hopelessly muddled. As we find them, they all have a clear sense of purpose, or so it seems. Not for long, power dynamics change. The world changes, people change. This is about battles big and small, macro and micro, political and familial. It's about rebellion and revolt on the world stage and under our own roofs. It's about how life gets in the way of, or at the very least challenges, our ideals, our ethics, our principles. It's about the stories we tell ourselves about ourselves and the reality of that as time passes. It's about how none of us are as well defined or even as one dimensional as we might like to think. Things change. It's a real thrill. Cinema absolutely harnessed. All of this is presented through a clearly personal and, more significantly, humane perspective. Anderson has, he has said, been tinkering with this for the best part of 2 decades. And it's so sprawling, so ambitious, and so expensive. Maybe it wouldn't have been possible, at least for him 20 years ago. But as both filmmaker and family man, specifically a father, it feels like everything he's done and lived through has evolved into this. You can sense his own experience throughout, bubbling and crackling in the celluloid. He's dealt with families and father figures before, of course, most notably in Boogie Nights, Magnolia, and The Master, but never as keenly and perhaps as sensitively as he does here. There is a purity and heartbreaking sweetness. For the majority of the movie, DiCaprio's explosives expert Pat, once one of the figureheads of freedom fighting revolutionary movement, the French 75, wants nothing more than for his daughter Willa, Chase Infinity, to be safe. Easier said than done with Sean Penn's outstandingly repellent Colonel Lockjaw on their tail. As such, DiCaprio provides a masterclass in panic and paranoia, ensconced in his dressing gown, engulfed in skunk smoke. But most arresting is his glassy eyed, uncompromising love for his kid. You don't doubt it for a second. That relationship is the heart of the film, and Infinity, in her first film credit, is that heart. She is a titan. Squaring up to DiCaprio like she's been acting forever, countering the tenderness with unbridled piss and vinegar. And then there is America itself, another recurring theme for Anderson, who, with his reported $100 million plus budget and his VistaVision cameras, shoots the shit out of it. One sequence in particular, involving a horribly tense, sinisterly mannered car chase, unfolds on rolling desert roads, terrifying blind summits, providing omniscient doom, front and rear mounted cameras, taking us on a sort of haunted roller coaster ride. The landscape itself signaling death. It's a real thrill. Cinema absolutely harnessed. Everything is here. Related articles, movies 2701 2026, movies 1201 2026, movies 1909 2025, movies 2012 2025, movies 27/3 2025, one battle after another, release dates, target group, details. Washed up revolutionary Bob, Leonardo DiCaprio, exists in a state of stone paranoia, surviving off grid with his spirited, self reliant daughter Willa Chase Infinity. When his evil nemesis, Sean Penn, resurfaces after 16 years and she goes missing, the former radical scrambles to find her, father and daughter both battling the consequences of his past. Official providers, videos, cast background. The new film by master director Paul Thomas Anderson, known for modern classics such as There Will Be Blood, Magnolia, and Boogie Nights. Recent news for One Battle After Another, release dates, target group, details, similar movies. These videos might interest you. What exactly is One Battle After Another about? Paul Thomas Anderson's movie is deliberately disorienting. Seeing it twice clarified some things. Enter your email to receive alerts for this author. Sign in or create an account to better manage your email preferences. If you're confused about what's going on in Paul Thomas Anderson's One Battle After Another, don't worry. So is its hero, adult ex-revolutionary Bob Ferguson, Leonardo DiCaprio, in the movie's present, which is never precisely identified but looks and feels a lot like now. Bob says he's 42 and was born somewhere in the 80s. Bob is a rumpled single dad living off the grid, trying his best to raise his 16-year-old daughter, Willa Chase Infinity, without fully understanding the world she inhabits. But even in the past, where he and Willa's mother, Tiana Taylor, are part of a militant group called the French 75, he's at something of a loss. As his comrade and lover, Perfidia Beverly Hills, preps the group's members for a raid on an immigrant detention facility, a befuddled Bob is just trying to keep up. I'm a little unclear what the plan is, he squeaks. I need some direction. You could describe the nearly 3 hours of movie that follows in many ways as a knockabout satire or a political broadside, or, as Anderson put it after a screening this week, an action comedy with a side of postpartum depression. But one way to think of it is as one man's epic journey to figure out just what the hell is going on. Bob, or Pat Calhoun, as he is known back in his radical days, isn't a hanger on, exactly. But it's telling that his specialty is making bombs that are set to go off in unoccupied buildings. During the opening raid, he hangs back as Perfidia storms into the compound and sets off fireworks that turn their local action into a larger spectacle. Like Anderson, it's his job to put on a show. Meanwhile, Perfidia comes face to face with Sean Penn's call, Stephen J. Lockjaw, holding him at gunpoint while she announces just what the French 75 stands for: free borders, free bodies, free choices, and free from fucking fear. Perhaps unsurprisingly, Perfidia is also the one who gets caught after a bank robbery goes horribly awry. Although Anderson has moved Thomas Pynchon's Vineland, on which One Battle is very loosely based, forward in time by several decades, he's still clearly drawing on the real life history of groups like the Weather Underground and the Symbionese Liberation Army. That leaves Bob to raise their daughter in hiding, perpetually afraid that the authorities may one day catch up with them. His paranoia is based, in fact, especially after several of his former comrades are shot dead in the street, but it has a way of feeding on itself. And the fact that he's always on some sort of drug certainly doesn't help matters. It's unclear how much Willa knows about her parents' past, but she doesn't seem to have inherited their revolutionary fervor. And the distinction between Bob's justified caution and standard paternal overprotectiveness is elusive to them both. When he grills her friends at the door of their house, a bare bones shack nestled deep in the forest, is he looking out for her safety, or is he just a dad whose little girl is growing up faster than he can adjust? Anderson himself is no revolutionary, and he's rarely shown much interest in political or topical filmmaking. The closest he's come to radicalism is emulating a famous long take from the communist propaganda film I Am Cuba in his porn industry fantasia Boogie Nights. But he is, like DiCaprio's character, the father of a biracial daughter. Anderson has four children with the actress Maya Rudolph, and the movie is rooted in Bob's deep seated determination to do right by his child while struggling to grasp what that actually means. An avowed Pynchon fan who already adapted the author's Inherent Vice for the screen in 2014, Anderson spent 2 decades tinkering with the script for what became One Battle After Another. But he said it wasn't until he became a father that he began to understand what his version of the story would be about. And indeed, the relationship between a middle aged radical and his daughter is nearly the only element of Pynchon's novel he retains. The movie isn't even officially an adaptation of the book. Per the credits, it's merely inspired by it. Bob means well, of course, but his enforced isolation has turned his revolutionary fervor into a kind of nostalgia for struggles past. While Willa is out at her school dance, he's at home smoking a joint and watching the Battle of Algiers. Before the dance, Willa's friends drop by to pick her up, and as one approaches the front door, Bob anxiously quizzes her on their pronouns. But rather than appreciate her father's interest, Willa heaves the heaviest of sighs, even as her dad insists he's just trying to be polite. As the Gen X father of a Gen Z daughter, I can testify firsthand to the waves of frustration that such a query can generate. It wouldn't surprise me if the exchange in Anderson's movie was transcribed verbatim. Bob wants Willa to see how hard he's trying, but he knows he's always a few steps behind, and there are things about the world she exists in that he'll never be equipped to teach her. In a rare moment of self reflection, amid the movie's frenzied chaos, he laments that he never even learned how to do her hair. One Battle After Another is a massive, sprawling epic, but it moves at a furious pace, and although it includes shootouts and a bona fide car chase, much of the key action takes place off screen. Anderson's screenplay is immaculately structured, but unless you're particularly attentive to the dialogue, it can feel like a movie in which things simply just happen. My sense is that Anderson wants you, like Bob, to feel like you're struggling just to keep your head above water. This is, after all, the defining tone of Pynchon's novels, which is why so many key lines are couched in group argot, as if we are eavesdropping on a conversation that isn't intended for us. Willa's martial arts teacher, Benicio Del Toro, doesn't tell Bob that he's helping to bring migrants into the country. He says he's involved in a Latino Harriet Tubman situation. And while the movie doesn't bury the actor's words the way Christopher Nolan does, the sound mix definitely favors naturalism over clarity, which is all to say that while you can nail down a cause for every effect, Anderson seems fine with letting the audience sit back and enjoy the ride. You can figure it out, but you don't have to. That lightness of touch also allows Anderson to salt his movie with allusions to the contemporary political climate without tying it to any specific incident or even any specific administration. Images of children playing with crumpled up mylar blankets inside a chain link pen evoke the horrors of child separation, and the opening shot of the wall on the US Mexico border feels like a direct allusion to Trump's immigration crackdown, but the time jump serves as an implicit reminder. The wall's first segments were constructed under President Bill Clinton, and that Obama deported more people than Trump. The last 9 years may have brought the country's uglier elements closer to the surface, but that doesn't mean they weren't there before. The movie's most ingenious invention is also its most absurd. At the heart of its darkness is a shadowy group called the Christmas Adventurers Club, whose flagrantly silly name belies its sinister agenda. Although one member played in an understated casting coup by the legendary Saturday Night Live writer Jim Downey, describes their enemies as dangerous lunatics, haters, and punk trash. They are quite plainly white supremacists, determined to empower their race and disenfranchise the rest, at least when it's not practical to purge them altogether. If Tony Goldwyn, who plays Virgil Throckmorton, one of the club's higher ups, isn't reprising his role as Scandal's conspiracy plague commander in chief, the movie certainly allows you to look at one and see the other. Even as he's talking about the need to make the world safe and pure, or quizzing a prospective Christmas adventurer about whether they are American born by Gentile Penn's call Lockjaw, who barks out orders about rounding up wet and stinkies, is more crudely racist, more nakedly driven by his baser urges. But there's something more chilling about the way Goldwyn can issue a cryptic directive about drugs and tacos and just assume correctly that the others around can correctly divine his malicious intent. They don't need to have anything explained to them because they're the ones who dictate how the world operates. Sometimes the meaning of their words becomes clear. At others, as when Virgil tosses off a reference to a half Comanche mercenary who served the group well at something called Squatting Pebble, we're left to speculate. The parallel to the Standing Rock protests is easy enough. But is he suggesting that his agent infiltrated the movement in order to undermine it? And if so, is Anderson implying that the same thing happened in the real world? By the time we are done processing all of this, a conspiratorial allegation wrapped inside a bit of goofy wordplay, the movie has long since moved on and we never circle back. It took me two viewings just to catch what Goldwyn was saying, and I'm sure there are other pieces of the puzzle that flew right by me. People tend to reserve the term world building for more fantastical settings, but one battle after another takes place in a fully imagined cosmos, even if the film's text only exposes us to slivers of it. We always have the sense that there's something bigger just outside the frame, beyond our ability to comprehend it. If it doesn't play like a conspiracy thriller, that's only because most of its characters have no idea there's any conspiracy to unravel. As befits a movie set in the 21st century, everything in one battle after another is a few degrees removed from its source. The French 75 is a revolutionary group named for a cocktail named for a piece of artillery. Bob Ferguson was once Ghetto Pat, aka Pat Calhoun, aka the Rocket Man. That reproduction breeds obscurity, the way a copy of a copy grows blurrier with every generation. But it's also a form of lineage, a history of meaning, of ideals, of struggle, passed on from one generation to the next, one battle after another. The fight is never won, but it also can be lost, at least not forever. We take from those before, and we pass on what we can, knowing that one lifetime isn't enough to understand everything wrong with this world, let alone to figure out how to make a better one. Get the best of culture, comedy, Donald Trump, immigration race, racism, the Oscars, action thrillers. We need to talk about your ad blocker. Slate relies on advertising to support our journalism. If you value our work, please disable your ad blocker. If you want to block ads but still support Slate, consider subscribing. Already a member? Sign in here. One battle after another review, another slam dunk for PTA, published 17 Sep 2025. Words by David Jenkins, directed by Paul Thomas Anderson, starring Leonardo DiCaprio, Tiana Taylor, and Sean Penn. Runtime 162 Mere, released 26 Sep 2025. Anticipation. How the fuck do you adapt a novel like Vineland? If anyone can, it's PTA. Enjoyment. To quote Bart Simpson when he discovers the school is on strike, pleasure overload in retrospect. Hope this one makes an absolute bag at the box office. A scorching political thriller with a heart from Paul Thomas Anderson that presents a filmmaker at the apex of his powers. Sometimes it takes the creative impetus of a great filmmaker to finally pick up that chunky novel that's been sitting gathering dust on your bookshelves since God knows when. Such was the case with my own yellowing edition of Thomas Pynchon's 1990 novel, Vinland, which I'd shirked for too long, having understood it to be, from contemporary reviews, one of the author's more opaque works, which is saying something. When it was announced that Paul Thomas Anderson was returning once more to the PCU, Pynchon Cinematic Universe, following 2014's superb Inherent Vice, by adapting Vineland for the screen, this was the sign I needed to finally dive in. For me, the book has some insanely high highs, but its concentric structure and a logic bothering tendency towards nesting digressions led me to wonder how any mortal, let alone the great Paul Thomas Anderson, could transpose this nine sided ratfuck of an epic into the visual medium. Perhaps the most delightful surprise of his new work, One Battle After Another, is that in spirit, it is a perfect adaptation of the novel without having very many of the same characters, shifting its time frame to the present day and slicing away a good half of the page count for necessary brevity. A good literary adaptation is not a case of scooping out the dialogue and filming the action on every page for maximum fidelity and fan service. It's about ingesting the themes and purpose of a novel and trying as best you can to honor the intentions of the author. Get more Little White Lies. Despite the fact that this is a PTA film with car chases, shootouts, military executions, bank robberies, and citywide sieges, it is also one of the filmmaker's more melancholy works. A film about characters who have allowed time to slip away from them and have abandoned the youthful ideals that at one time gave a vital spritz to life. It's a study of what happens after the revolution when you sense that the action you've taken has led to superficial change, but it starts to slowly fade out as the dismal status quo wafts back like a bad smell. Bob Ferguson, Leonardo DiCaprio, having a great time, is a wild eyed explosives expert and a stringer for the left wing militant group, the French 75. He seems to get a party like kick out of his work, which is sometimes a diversionary tactic such as setting off fireworks, but also involves planting bombs in office buildings to create leverage for the group's demands, which are never made clear, but definitely involve preventing the oppression of immigrants in the US, which is always timely, but even more so in the current moment. De facto leader of the gang is Perfidia Beverly Hills, Teyana Taylor, an athletic and almost psychotically driven femme fatale who's extremely morally comfortable when it comes to administering violence towards those she feels deserve it. Her and Bob definitely have a little touchy feely thing going, though it seems he is more invested than she is. On the first big sortie, in which the group tear down a roadside immigrant encampment, Perfidia encounters and sexually humiliates Colonel Steve Lockjaw, Sean Penn, looking like Eric von Stroheim without the monocle, a latent white supremacist whose separatist yearnings are not enough to suppress the fact that he really digs the game that Perfidia is playing. And so a love triangle is born. And eventually, so is a child, Chase Infinity's villa, brought up by Bob when Perfidia is forced by Steve into a very tight ethical corner. Anderson manages to build this context out at breakneck pace in the film's dazzling opening chapter, a masterpiece of expressive montage that never once talks down to the intelligence of the audience to read and understand the torrent of images it delivers. Its second chapter takes place years later when Bob, now a druggy burnout, and the industrious villa are living off grid in the township of Buckton Cross, a locale with a mostly Latino population. There, they are able to bask in the Zen like circumspection of a local dojo owner referred to exclusively as Sensei. An insanely cool Benicio Del Toro could be an all timer from him, who ends up becoming something of a guardian angel, especially when it transpires that Steve Lockjaw is back on Bob's scent. One battle after another looks like an expensive film, though we don't make that observation in the pejorative. Every damn nickel and dime has been thrown up on that screen through its lovingly fastidious production design, the use of visually arresting and meaningful public spaces for its locations, the costumes, props, and cars whose every color pops, especially when captured on 70 millimeters Vistavision film stock. Sure, DiCaprio is the box office ace up its sleeve, but there is so much of a thrill to be had simply from marinating in the craft of this thing, to allow yourself to be enveloped in the fluid editing, the AM radio musical selections, and even to wonder how some parts of it were even built. There's a car chase scene in the film's final act, which visually looks like nothing else you've ever seen before. It's very wild and very weird. Yet, while One Battle After Another is a film that is built from many extraordinary constituent parts, Johnny Greenwood's score another blinder. It's how all these elements work in concert that really makes it sing as a motion picture. In its cocky dynamism and the manic energy of the performances and camera work, It's hard not to hark back to early PTA bedrocks such as Boogie Nights and Magnolia, and yet this is maybe a case of things coming full circle as the confident looseness and natural rhythms of a film like Licorice Pizza, which itself has touch of the Pynchons about it, are also present here in some of the film's little interludes and fascinating cultural touchpoints. So sorry to not be able to offer anything a little more surprising in this write up, but this is another slam dunk for Anderson, who has made a film that is a very rare beast indeed. One that is incredibly fun without ever once straining to be. And if you're reading these words, it's your God given duty to go see this in a cinema on the biggest, loudest screen you're able to access. Not just as a guaranteed hit of pleasure, but to make sure that whoever's financially enabling Anderson to make his wonderful works has reason to keep doing so long into the future. If it's a hit, best pick up that copy of Gravity's Rainbow right now. You might like Inherent Vice by David Jenkins. Paul Thomas Anderson charts the end of the hippie dream in this blissful gumshoe chimera. Licorice Pizza by David Jenkins. Newcomers Alana Haim and Cooper Hoffman shine in Paul Thomas Anderson's most purely pleasurable film to date. The Master by Adam Woodward, Paul Thomas Anderson's spiritual post war love story will restore your faith in cinema. Altman by Adam Woodward. A roistering, if functional, tour through the life and work of the new Hollywood godhead. Phantom Thread by David Jenkins. Paul Thomas Anderson's latest is a swooning, masochistic love story set in mid century London. It might just be his best film. Shutter Island by Adam Woodward. Martin Scorsese's latest is little more than a frustrating cobweb box of tricks and twists. Subscribe to LW's weekly. Want to keep up with all things film? Our free weekly newsletter drops every Friday, bringing you the latest film news, reviews, and features, plus discounts and extras from Team LW Lies. Accessibility settings text applies the open dyslexic font designed to improve readability for individuals with dyslexia. Applies a more readable font throughout the website, improving readability, underlines links throughout the website, making them easier to distinguish. Adjust the font size for improved readability. Visuals reduces animations and disables autoplaying videos across the website, reducing distractions and improving focus. Reduces the color saturation throughout the website to create a more soothing visual experience. Increases the contrast of elements on the website, making text and interface elements easier to distinguish. Paul Thomas Anderson's One Battle After Another joins Sinners and Hamnet as early Oscar frontrunner. Ann Thompson share on Facebook post, Google preferred, share on LinkedIn, show more sharing options, share to Flipboard. Submit to Reddit, pin it. Post to Tumblr, email, print this page, share on WhatsApp. The most recent trailer for Paul Thomas Anderson's One Battle After Another fails to capture its substantial cinematic pleasures. No surprise then that Warner Bros. Told us they are still tinkering with the marketing materials. The action thriller played like gangbusters to a packed industry screening at the Stephen J. Ross Theatre on Tuesday night, one of four venues capable of playing Vista Vision, Anderson's preferred format. He told me afterwards, most people will have to settle for 70 millimeters or IMAX. Los Angeles Vista is already sold out. Anderson said he's trying to outfit more theaters around the country to play Vista Vision. The screening pulled in many fellow heavyweight filmmakers, including Christopher Nolan, Alejandro Gonzalez Iñárritu, Rian Johnson, and Daniel Scheinert, and will play well for cinephiles who will appreciate its accomplished mise-en-scène, because it is also loosely based on a Thomas Pynchon novel, Vineland. Oh, many have assumed its commerciality might be limited, much like Inherent Vice, which grossed just $14.8 million worldwide. But this fast paced, hilarious, and entertaining $115 million outing could indeed be commercial. Warner's has already announced Oscar campaigns for Hits, Sinners, and Weapons, and will pursue multiple categories for One Battle After Another. A Best Actor nomination for Leonardo DiCaprio is in the bag for his moving and comedic performance as Bob Ferguson, a one-time revolutionary with expertise in explosives who fathers a daughter with fellow activist Perfidia Beverly Hills, supporting actress contender Teyana Taylor, who winds up on the wrong side of military officer Stephen Lockjaw, supporting actor contender Sean Penn, and disappears. Ferguson winds up raising the child alone, And 16 years later, Lockjaw tracks them down and all hell breaks loose. The Crafts will also support this impeccably mounted movie, from Anderson and Michael Bauman's inventive cinematography to Johnny Greenwood's unusual piano leaning score, which masterfully tracks the laughs and builds suspense. At the Q&A, moderated by Dave Karger and attended by Anderson, DiCaprio, Taylor Penn, Regina Hall, Benicio Del Toro, and newcomer Chase Infinity, Anderson said he worked on the script off and on in spurts since 1999 before finally putting it on the front burner. DiCaprio was amazed by the imagination on display in the script. I can't imagine a writer coming up with the concept of the Christmas Adventurers Club, he said. How do you come up with this pseudo Masonic group that you feel may exist in this world? Does it? Is there some entity like that? Do they exist? Just the imagination of this world where he's pushing these extremes so that the humor is so topical and holding a mirror to society right now. I would have done anything that Paul asked me to do. Anderson calls DiCaprio's Ferguson a sloppy hero. This guy's stumbling around as an expert in the first part of the movie, said DiCaprio, trying to catch up with this vivacious revolutionary who's fallen in love but doesn't necessarily make the right choices and then is left on his own to raise this child and is completely ill equipped. He's haunted by his past. He's trying to be a father and failing miserably. What would he be doing when his daughter gets kidnapped and his past comes back to haunt him? He'd be sitting there, stoned out of his mind, paranoid, and in a rope for the rest of the movie and continuously failing. The Oscar winner continued. There's a traditional way to play this character. There's something that is expected. And Paul always takes an unexpected route. It's the sheer pursuit of never giving up for the person that he loves. And that's his heroism. At the end of the day, he's a relentless hound dog that is falling off of roofs and getting shocked, but he never gives up. And that's his heroism. He's a flawed protagonist, which I love to play. Penn embraced the opportunity to play a ramrod, straight shaved head racist, whose values are dead opposite to his. People at large can understand the mind game of what happened if you replace the word morality with lethality, he said. It's fun to think that way because competence in anything has a common ground. And when something's new, if you make an adjustment, assuming I made an adjustment, it will surprise you how all the rest of you responds. With Perfidia Beverly Hills, Taylor loved playing a badass, she said. Would I be shooting a machine gun pregnant? Probably not. The vision of it was fucking iconic. I've been in this space of being in survival mode before, and survival mode is not a pretty place to be. Survival mode is also not a pretty place to be when you're dealing with postpartum depression. I was able to empathize and give her grace and understand that she's just trying to figure it out. She's complex. Del Toro, who also starred in Inherent Vice, has developed a reputation for being able to manage a big car like no one else. Best goddamn actor driver in the business, said Anderson. He could take any American car and park it right fucking there, right wherever you need. Del Toro added, gotta be a big car, I will park it anywhere. I grew up with those big cars, and if you messed up, you were going to be hit in the head. So I learned the hard way. It was important to Anderson to work humor into the film. I do have a prerequisite when I'm going to see a film, which is, are there any laughs? Because if there's no laughs, I don't want to see it, the filmmaker said. I used to feel like I wanted to see serious movies, and nowadays I have to have laughs. We were all on the same page about the things that we found funny, generally back to the absurdities of human nature. Generally, they were in that ballpark, that gag world. But the thing with jokes is they have to be there for a reason. They have to exist from the characters. Characters telling jokes usually doesn't quite work. Humor arising out of the situation from the circumstances generally works the best. We all share a sense of humor here. And even in some of the darker stuff, you find humor at the absurdity of it. Otherwise, you're going to spend a lot of time crying. Very sad. Taylor sat through the film at the Monday night premiere and again on Tuesday night. Y'all passed the vibe check, she said, because it did exactly what I knew it would do. It was so beautiful. It's so emotional to watch because everybody sitting here put blood, sweat, and tears into this film. Working with Anderson, there is an easiness to it, said DiCaprio. When Benicio came on board too, things just click and they work and there's a chemistry. and it's not something that you have to have a profound effort to blossom on set. Paul, he's got an incredible bullshit detector, which I love. I need that as an actor. I need to have somebody rein in certain choices. I give a lot of different ideas, and he's got this ease and the simplicity and this conviction with what he wants to do. He's also willing to let you take control of your character. If he feels like you have a good idea, and it's usually 1 out of 10 that he does think, the film on a dime can take a completely different direction. That flexibility that he has when he hears that one good idea to say, all right, none of that's on the paper, let's charge forward. And that's an amazing gift. It's just trust and respect, said Anderson. I trust all these guys and respect. You don't fight with anybody you respect. You don't argue. It's just joy, overwhelming joy. Warner Bros. Will release One Battle After Another in theaters on Friday, September 26. By providing your information, you agree to our terms of use and our privacy policy. We use vendors that may also process your information to help provide our services. This site is protected by reCAPTCHA Enterprise, and the Google privacy policy and terms of service apply most popular. You may also like One Battle After Another is an act of resistance and a stone cold masterpiece by David Fear. David Fear. These are curious and perilous times we live in, the kind that call for courage and perseverance on all fronts. It can be exhausting, even if you are not trying to take down the establishment or have long since given up the righteous fight. Paul Thomas Anderson's One Battle After Another is a lot of things. A parable about fathers and daughters, a conspiracy thriller for the Ice Age, an ensemble comedy that encourages all stars to get their best eccentricity on, the single greatest film of 2025, a movie that's less a VistaVision adaptation of Thomas Pynchon's 1990 novel Vineland than a passing nod to the author on the way to its own profound insights. Above all, it's an act of resistance, both the lowercase and capital R type, that suggests it may have an answer as to how we battle through this onslaught against our better angels. But first, a few things need to get blown the fuck up. Luckily, this woozy, winding epic has a handful of people on deck who are willing to do exactly that. They are the French 75, a loose organization of self appointed urban freedom fighters led, more or less, by Perfidia Beverly Hills, Tayana Taylor. The group has targeted an immigration holding center in San Diego in what they hopes will be the first salvo in a revolution. They need to make an announcement, which is where the Rocketman comes in. He's Pat, aka Ghetto Pat, Leonardo DiCaprio, and specializes in weapons, bomb making, creating a big noise. After the 75 slip into the camp under the cover of darkness, he's tasked with providing the fireworks. It's a display of pageantry designed to complement Perfidia's war cry mantra. Free borders, free bodies, free choices, and free from fucking fear. You could say the same thing about the sequence itself, which Anderson stages like a spectacle in miniature, complete with a rallying second-hand rush. We are only 10 minutes in and already at a full gallop. Meanwhile, Perfidia needs to neutralize the person in charge, a military colonel named Stephen J. Lockjaw, Sean Penn. He's a hard-ass with a hard-on for power. This is not a colloquialism. Lockjaw is in a priapic state when we meet him and takes the indignity of being imprisoned in his own prison extremely personally. The gent with the bad alt-right haircut is also a neo-Nazi who nonetheless recognizes a fellow warrior in Perfidia, and a mixture of contempt and lust envelopes the rat bastard like a shroud. Lockjaw vows that they will meet again and makes good on his promise. He's one third of a triangle that will involve him, Perfidia, and a Pat. It ends with a baby, a bank robbery gone bad, and the French 75's leader being put in the witness protection program before flying that particular coup to parts unknown. Editor's picks: the 250 greatest albums of the 21st century so far, the 100 best TV episodes of all time, the 500 greatest albums of all time, 100 best movies of the 21st century. This is merely one battle after another's appetizer course, a way of setting the stage for the struggle and the stakes to come. Fast forward 16 years later, and as the voiceover tells us, the world has changed very little. Still, times moves forward. Perdidia remains in the wind. Pat has become an every stoner named Bob, having lived underground in the fictional Northern California town of Bucktown Cross and raised his baby in peace for well over a decade. That infant is now a teenager named Willa Chase Infinity, practicing her martial arts moves in a dojo as Steely Dan's Dirty Work plays on the soundtrack. A quick aside about the music. Johnny Greenwood's score could not be better suited to PTA's vision of a broken America or the constant forward momentum of the film's pacing, whether he's arranging symphonic bursts of strings or utilizing a single insistent piano note plunked for maximum tension. These two continue to have the sort of divinely simpatico creative relationship that ranks up there with Spielberg and John Williams or Hitchcock and Bernard Herrmann. And yet, when you see this introduction scene set to the Can't Buy a Thrill track, you're reminded that this is same filmmaker who gave us that pitch perfect He Needs Me, Q in Punch Drunk Love, and a whole KTEL compilation's worth of hits to reflect the ever-changing moods of boogie nights. It's enough to make you weep. Nobody knows how to utilize a needle drop better. Related content. K-pop Demon Hunter singer, says Leonardo DiCaprio, made her nervous during BAFTA performance. Leonardo DiCaprio and the Bezos Earth Fund launch initiative to recover critically endangered species. Tiana Taylor thanks Jay-Z after performing with him at iconic Yankee Stadium finale. Tiana Taylor accepts Icon of the Year honor at BT Awards 2026. I'm accepting what I've earned with gratitude and lockjaw. He's trying to gain entry into the Rancid elite via a group known as the Christmas Adventurers Club, made up of millionaire string pullers yearning for a world of racial purity and those American born by Gentile. Yada yada yada. First, however, he has to track down Bob and Willa and tie up loose ends. And blessed with a lot of soldiers and firepower that may be from one of many independent militias or maybe from the US government itself. Six of one these days, Lockjaw is determined to see his mission through. The character's name is not just highly Pynchonesque, but very well earned, by the way. Penn plays this obsessive man as a walking, talking bald fist with ramrod posture and a permanent expression of distaste. It's an expert portrait of self loathing and redirected rage, and a reminder that though the actor has been more selective about taking on screen gigs, he's still a strong contender for GOAT status. Penn knows exactly how to walk the line between caricature and the truthful cracking open of someone determined to stay locked on target. This is best in show work. We've barely even skimmed the surface of this heady mix of father figures and bad dads, underground railroads and war machines, secret societies, and state sanctioned violence. One battle after another is truly one stunning thrumming bit of business after another, blessed with DiCaprio's manic, take on paranoid parental guidance, understated supporting turns from Regina Hall and Benicio Del Toro as allies to the cause, and enough detours through the source material to capture the literary giant's vibe. A trip to the wheat growing convent run by Sisters of the Brave Beaver comes straight from the text with near verbatim exchanges. There's a serious flexing of chops on display, notably during some cross cutting between two opposing camps before a raid and two different equally kinetic car chases. Yet it's never virtuosity for virtuosity's sake. Anderson is intent on telling a story, not blithely showing off. If this ambitious tale of familial bonds and institutional might also offers a rebuke to the idea that the movies are a thing of the past and should just go gently into the night, that's a bonus. It's a giant, fit to burst attempt to be as intimate as possible. Trending stories. Incarcerated for life in Trump's war on the left. Why was it so hard for Sam Cooke's grandkids to drop a soul album? GOP candidate slammed for telling voters to deal with gas prices by cutting back on Starbucks. Taylor Swift removes yet another song from yet another White House TikTok video. PTA has, of course, tackled T. Pynchon before and nailed the writer's signature funky absurdism. One part Motormouth Fred Allen, three parts The Furry Freak Brothers with his 2014 film Inherent Vice. Here, he's using the book as a springboard for what feels like his own fixations and preoccupations, his personal feelings of empathy and outrage. Vineland takes place squarely in Reagan's 1980s with burnt out 1960s radicals. Battle is not tied to any particular era, any particular revolution. The filmmaker has both stripped the narrative down and somehow exponentially complicated things by unmooring it from the period. It's set in a timeless, perpetual present that feels uncomfortably like America circa right now. That's why the first half feels like a declaration of war, bustling with a sense that some sort of flip the bird action is needed, and the back half makes you sympathize with everyone's frazzled, desperate exhaustion. And yet, there's hope in them, Thor, Northern California hills, which brings us back to that aforementioned answer. In its sprawling attempt to partially wrap its arms around the great step backward age we find ourselves in, one battle after another shares a slight kinship with another Shoot the Moon auteur work of recent vintage, Eddington. Ari Aster's film stared directly into the abyss and shuddering worried about how we could or should fight back. Anderson's humanistic masterpiece of a movie says, you fight it with love. That's the end game. That's how you retain your decency and sanity. That's the only way you protect the future and change it. That's how you live to battle another day. More news. Chris Carter talks R-rated new torture porn director's cut of The X-Files. I Want to Believe. The Truth Is in Here by Corey Grove. Chris Carter talks R-rated new torture porn director's cut of The X-Files. I Want to Believe. The Truth Is in Here by Corey Grove. Watch Cat's Eye Reveal Their Inner Animal on Fallen Late Night TV by Emily Zemler. Watch Cat's Eye Reveal Their Inner Animal on Fallen Late Night TV by Emily Zemler. Nick Reiner indicted for alleged murders of parents. Prosecutors cite lying in wait courts and crime by Nancy Dillon. Nick Reiner indicted for alleged murders of parents. Prosecutors cite lying in wait. Courts and crime by Nancy Dillon. Jenna Fisher, Kiernan Shipka. More star support. Lucy Davis following incurable cancer. Diagnosis, love and support by Althea Legaspi, Jenna Fisher, Kiernan Shipka. More star support Lucy Davis following incurable cancer diagnosis. Love and support by Althea Legaspi. The End of Oak Street is the best vintage Spielberg ripoff of the past decade, Jurassic Lark by David Fear. The End of Oak Street is the best vintage Spielberg ripoff of the past decade, Jurassic Lark by David Fear. Most popular, David Ellison says he'll pull Paramount out of California starting Oct. 1. If states refuse to negotiate settlement in antitrust suit. Brad Pitt says he's drinking again after 7 years of sobriety. Method Man drops limited edition hat collection with TW and Tickle Athletics. Nancy Guthrie's disappearance may have a chillingly simple explanation. Forensic psychologist says you might also like. This AI startup made a 24-hour AI news channel. Who wants this? 2 hours ago. This AI startup made a 24-hour AI news channel. Who wants this? 50 plus new mom gifts that she'll actually want, according to a first-time mom 4 months ago. 50 plus new mom gifts that she'll actually want, according to a first-time mom. Welcome to IndieWire Sequels Week 3 days ago. Welcome to IndieWire Sequels Week. Underdog says it's being sued by Aristotle over takeover terms 4 hours ago. Underdog says it's being sued by Aristotle over takeover terms. Rolling Stone is a part of Penske Media Corporation, 2026, Rolling Stone LLC. All rights reserved.